Welcome to episode 67 of The Question. My name is Ben Callahan, and I am very excited to welcome my co-host this week, Yesenia Perez-Cruz. We're going to talk about design systems that differentiate. Let's get into it. You've been doing this a while, and I want to, if you wouldn't mind, tell us sort of a little bit about your background and how you got into design systems in particular.
Yeah, I mean, when I was in college, I studied graphic design. Like it was primarily print design. We had maybe some, my lord, what were we using back then? Dreamweaver classes, like very like basic web classes, but it was primarily like a graphic design background. So my first job, I was working at an agency called Happy Cog that did a lot of responsive websites. And because I had a print background, I wasn't used to making decisions in a systematic way. Like, oh, I need to not have 10 different header styles as you're going across an entire site. So I think the first article that I wrote about design systems was in 2011, but it was just describing my process at the time. It was literally just describing how I make decisions in a systematic way. It was nowhere near how we see design systems today. But eventually, with the agency work, we ended up delivering, again, I think we were calling them style guides for clients. And as part of that work, I had done some projects that had like early theming. Like I did a series of websites for Jose Garces, who's a like restaurateur in Philadelphia, and I think the restaurants had like six different restaurants with distinct branding, and so we had to make it feel distinct. And then I got into, oh, how do you do brand expression in a systematic way? And so from that experience, then I led the design system at Vox Media, which was 8 different, very distinct editorial brands that were in the process of moving from having individual development teams to a centralized team and needed to be on a shared platform. And after that, I moved on to Shopify and I led the Polaris design system. And again, with the same lens, they had gotten to a point in time where the system had shipped. There was good adoption, but they had noticed the sameness creep in. And, the point of sale team had adopted the same design system as the Shopify admin, and it felt way too similar. The mobile team adopted the same system. And so that was really what I worked on there was how do we actually get diverse expression within a huge platform. So yeah, I was there for about almost 6 years, and now in the past couple of months, I've branched out and I've been doing some independent design work and also consulting for teams.
Yeah. Amazing. Yesenia, I'm so fascinated with your approach to systems because I think so many of us come into the space looking for consistency across the interface. And it's not that I think you're against that, but I think you have this sort of lens of expression that you believe systems can empower or enable that I think a lot of us maybe leave that behind when we come into systems work. Is that a fair assessment of your kind of approach?
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, I think consistency is good to an extent,
Yeah.
and that extent I think is over exaggerated
Mm.
sometimes. So there's some very clear inconsistencies that can break trust, especially in products where building trust is very important. So you don't want to get an email from your bank that looks like it's a phishing email, and if it's
Yeah.
inconsistent with the brand, then yes, that can break trust. But I also think that consistency can delve into a space where suddenly it's not good anymore. Like the design
Yeah.
solution isn't good because the what it needs to convey has been flattened so much that it's not actually communicating information.
Yeah, I love this. I think it's such an important part of what we do. And a lot of the challenges that we face as systems practitioners maybe stem from, pushing too hard towards consistency, in some ways. You wrote this article not too long ago called Beyond the Plateau of Sameness. And that's something that I read probably 3 or 4 times because I think it really, I was doing some coaching work at that time. And a lot of what you were sharing in this article really sort of resonated with what I felt was relevant for the person I was working with. But all of this stuff kind of comes together. And as we were chatting last week or the week before about what we might discuss, this idea of sameness kind of came up again. And so we asked three specific questions of y'all this round. We asked, where do you most notice sameness emerging in your consuming products as a result of your system? And we gave you, I think, 5 or 6 options there to check, and you could choose multiple. And then we asked, which of the following best describes the primary goal of your system today? And we gave you 4 options, well, 3 options with another there. And then we gave you kind of just an open text space to answer this one. If you had to identify one specific part of your system's architecture that currently acts as a bottleneck to product expression, what would it be and why? And so you gave us some amazing answers in this third question, especially. It was really fun to read. We sent this out to 1,027 design system practitioners. We got 55 responses. As always, you can click this link to go see the raw data and unpack that data for yourself. We've done some work to summarize what we read in those things here in this larger section, but let's start just by looking at the more quantitative questions that we asked. So the first one was, asking you to choose where you see that sameness. And this was, I wasn't quite sure what to expect with these. It's always, you never really know, but this was a fairly even distribution. Yesenia, did you come to this question with any expectations or?
I think I was expecting maybe more on the layout and page structure, just based on where I've seen where what probably how I would answer. But I thought it was interesting that it was pretty even.
Yeah. The other thing that I loved was that there was a very small number of folks who said, "I don't notice that. I don't see meaningful sameness in my products." I think it was like, I don't know, 5 or 6 people who answered this way. Um, I put a little question here while we're going through some of this stuff at the beginning. If you're one of the folks who answered that way, if you said, "I don't notice meaningful sameness," I'd love for you to drop a sticky note just next to this answering this question. So what is unique about your architecture or your processes that removes that sameness? I just want to know. I think that's an interesting dynamic to the data here. So if you have a minute to do that, drop a note. That would be fun. Um, and then the second question, we had these we gave you kind of the list of, 3 options to describe your primary goal. A lot of folks here, about half, were on the efficiency side. The other was cohesion. And those two, those are the big ones that everybody kind of talks about. Differentiation, again, was like, I don't know that I expected to see even this many answer that. So, is that what was your expectation on this one, Jasenia?
I don't know if I came to it with expectations. I was just curious.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the reason why I was curious about this question was because something that I've noticed in my work is that sometimes in order to get that differentiation and reduce sameness, you have to make some things less efficient. Like
Mm,
make instead of being really easy to just toggle some things in Figma within a card and get something out the door, you have to remove some of the convenience to get people to stop and reflect on the best visual display. So that's why I was curious about the answer, but I didn't come with assumptions about how people
yeah.
might answer that.
Yeah. It's an interesting one. It's funny because a lot of the folks that I work with, they would tell me if I asked them why you have a system, they would probably give me both of these things, right? Like I think a lot of times they come together. We want to be faster and we want more cohesion. So I thought it was interesting that we kind of forced people to choose a primary.
Mhm.
And that kind of definitely makes, I'm sure that a lot of folks who are answering were like, oh my gosh, I have to pick one. so,
Yeah.
so yeah. Um, Interesting. There's a ton of places, a ton of directions that we could take this. One of the areas that I was like, as we were digging into this a little bit, looking through the data last night and this morning, you and I were talking about, I kind of just want to like dive deep here. So we were talking about some of this stuff around like one of the things we heard in the bottleneck answer was this idea of, we kind of summarized those here. Like, of course, like the flexibility of the components, tokens, structures, and things can sort of bottleneck you. Documentation was a big one, but this idea of decision paralysis was something that kind of
Mhm.
emerged in the answers that I just was like, wow, I wasn't thinking about it, but But going back, like thinking back on my experience, that definitely is something that I think
Yeah.
consuming teams struggle with. Like, how does that sit with you, Jasenia? Like that idea?
Yeah, absolutely. And, when I try to think about the best way to approach the shape of a design system, I go back to, all right, when I was a designer, when was I doing my best work? When was I in a flow state? When could I be the most creative? And like, uh, that's when I was relaxed, when I was having fun, when I could lean into my creativity. And when you don't know the bounds that you can work within. So if you're like, "Oh, I'm designing, but I don't know if I can put this line here," or "I don't know if I can use this color background," or "Oh,
Mhm.
am I gonna get in trouble if I do this?" Then that's not gonna lead to the best work because you tense up. And I think, that's how I see that decision paralysis
Yeah.
leading to sameness, because what you're gonna do is you're gonna retreat to what feels safe, which is just copying what is already out there because you know that has been approved already.
Oof. Yeah. I don't think that's what we want, right? Like, I know that we want cohesion, we want consistency and all those things, but not at the cost of sacrificing like the brand expression, you know? And so we have to solve this. It's what I hear you saying is like the lack of clarity in what I'm permitted to do takes away the safety of design. Is that
Yeah, yeah. Um, like, I think knowing the bounds that you can work within,
yeah.
and, how you actually solve design problems with the design language.
Okay, this is awesome. This is we're diving deep, folks. This is where you can raise your hand, jump right in. Do you have something to add to the conversation? A question, an experience that's relevant? And while you're getting ready for that, I'll just direct you over to some of the discussion that Jasenia and I have been having around this, like, and some things that she's used in the past to kind of encourage that that kind of creativity with systems work. Stephen, welcome, buddy. What's up?
Yo, hey guys. This reminds me of working with AI recently because it does whatever it can to not follow the rules. Um, it's like it's trying to find places where the design system documentation doesn't quite, you know, forbid something, but it explores that area anyway. Um, but anyway, I just wanted to throw that out there. It feels very like we could have a similar conversation about AI related to
That's
this topic
interesting.
too.
Yeah, yeah. Are you thinking of it specifically as like having it design things for you?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean the idea of like we want to have constraints, but we want to have like constraints that still sort of allow for creative freedom. Um, well, what it like if it, it's interesting to see like that could you could a human can take that many different ways, but so can an AI. So it's kind of the same
Yeah.
question, like
Yeah.
what are the proper constraints? Where is there room for creative exploration and sort of um, you know, getting rid of the product sameness problem?
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. Go ahead, Jasenia.
Yeah, no, I've definitely thought about that, like, where how are companies prioritizing the types of tasks that they give to an AI that is going to need even more explicit boundaries versus a person. I think more defining the design language as a tool that they can use to have that creative freedom can be very liberating, but I think there's that bit of judgment that a person can use to say like, "Oh, but is this working well?" So, yeah, I think that
Mhm.
there's definitely that interesting balance of how you meet both ends of the spectrum.
And I'm looking at the chat here too, and I see Kaelig's comment. So I'm gonna put you on the spot a little bit, buddy, but it says, "Everything looks too much the same, maybe is a good problem to have," right? So this to me is like, okay, there's a fundamental disagreement maybe in like philosophy here, which I think is really interesting for us to unpack. So, Jasenia, how would you respond to this idea that like it's what we want is everything for to look the same?
Well, I think that there's phases to design systems. And so, yeah, typically when you start out a design system, the reason that most teams do it is because they want that convergence. they have too much and they're trying to reduce. So yeah, absolutely. And then it's like, once you get there, the problem is convergence. How do you get to the convergence without getting stuck in place? And I think that that's the problem. Like when I see sameness as a problem, because if you created a design system in 5 years ago, you're converging on the way that the product existed 5 years ago, but you need to be able to move from there.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point. The what do we mean by expression? To me, uh, expression doesn't necessarily have to mean like brand expression, like personality. When I say expression, I mean, does the thing that you're using look like the action that you're taking? So if you have something that is I use the Mac, the what do you call it? The control center versus the system settings as a good example of that, where like the
Mm.
control center, it has really big affordances. It is meant for that quick preview and quick action, while system settings has very tiny controls and much more explanatory text. And so you get a spectrum of UI that's tailored for the task that you're doing. So that's what I mean for expression primarily.
Yeah. Matt, jump in.
Hey y'all, I'm Matt. I'm also a big fan, Yesenia, and glad to be in this group. My first time here. I had a
Welcome.
question. I read your article too, and I've been thinking about. Well, I should say I work for the New York Times, and our designers here can be very particular about typography, especially. And I was thinking about like we've had some design systems like come and go that were really strict on like this should be like text small, text medium, text large, and then a stakeholder comes in and was in like I want 15. And normally I'm like, oh no, but I'm trying to let it go. But one thing I was thinking about was kind of like the culture of like the places we work at too. Like when we let go of like the rigid rules, like I think a cool opportunity maybe is like the culture of like the design org can come out a little bit more too. But there's also like room for chaos in there too. So I was curious, like, have you experienced that? And like, I don't know, sort of like giving up design systems control and giving the control to like the customers, like how do they sort of manage it themselves based off like the culture of the org?
Oh yeah, that's a great question. Um, I the way that I have primarily thought about it is, design systems, you have layers. So you have your token layer, you have your components, you have your compositions. So as much as possible, I try to get people to think, how far can you push things at the compositional layer before we get to changing things at the token layer? Because but that's also because I think you can do something more powerful at that layer than you can at the token layer. Just to give an example, you could have a team that is trying to make a promo card component stand out in a feed on a home screen, and they're asking for, well, can we add a specific token for promo, like a new color? And I would push back on that, and I would say, like, what can you do that is actually more powerful to indicate that this is a promotion? So if you look at like Uber Eats has this promo card that literally looks like a coupon that's sitting at a different Z index that has like inset notches, and it's a much stronger visual representation of a promotion. So I usually push back if the change is going to create some debt that we have to manage while also not solving the customer problem well. But if it solves the customer problem really well, then that's a better trade-off for like taking on some debt, especially if it lives more at that composition level.
Yeah, this idea of composition came up a few times, and I feel that that is also a big part of your article, your recent article, Jasenia, is like this idea of like, when is it right to create more complexity inside of a component in terms of like configuring it versus separate that out and give that control, to folks to choose in a compositional way how they build a thing. So there's a lot of good folks reference that in their answers as well. Um, Stephen, what's up?
I think we're circling around a question of like when is it appropriate for the responsibility or the decision rights to pass between the system and the individual designer. So Yesenia, do you have any thoughts on the when? Like what are the criteria where the responsibility or decision rights shift from the system to the individual?
Do you mean in terms of creating something that's
Well,
different?
you're talking about you're talking about expression, and expression, the way I'm thinking about it is like specific product expression, specific designer expression. Like how does the designer solve this
Yeah.
particular product differentiation problem? So when do you differentiate between the design system and this individual product?
Yeah. I mean, I think a good point in time is if you are creating a new product feature or product line that didn't exist at the time that the design system was created. So you're actually pushing the edges of what the design system has available to you. Like at that point in time, you're really redefining a whole new set of patterns. Um, I think other times, um, like I don't. Can I pan over? Will people see where I am in the fig jam? I wanted to show that.
I can follow you. Yeah.
All
Let me
right, let me
find
see.
you. Go for it.
Again, another case was, if you have something, this is again just speaking to composition. This is using both of these screens are using the exact same like tokens, but the information is presented in a different way. So
Hmm.
I think in like the shaping of information is another time. Like I think that design systems give you the basic building blocks, but there's so much that you can do within the information that lives inside the components where we should encourage people to flex there.
This is so good. And just a little bit above this, there's this concept up above of sort of like decision and permission frameworks. I think this is getting at what you're asking about, Stephen. Like when is it okay for me to veer, right? And some of these exercises that Yesenia is sharing here, like start with a blank canvas. Don't start with the system, right? Like that's like a message that I have not heard many system leaders say to product people, right? But I love the idea of like solve the problem in a real way. We can always refactor things into system usage if we need to, but let's explore and solve the real problem, and if that requires veering from the system or extending it in some way, that's okay because we're serving our end users, right? And that's maybe our ultimate goal. Does that align with your thinking, Jasenia?
Yeah, and that reminded me, I saw a really good talk. I'll see if I can find it, but it was from I think his name was Cam, and it was a config talk
Mhm.
addressing sameness, and he had described this exactly that. Tell the designer start from the blank canvas, but then they had built a linting tool that would then you could run the linting tool on what you had created, and it would tell you, okay, here's the token, like here's this token that actually matches to one that exists in the system, and so it would catch things like all right, you have 15 pixel font here, but it should be 14 using this
Mm.
token. And so it found that balance of giving people a blank canvas, but then once they've diverged and found the best solution, how do they then can reel it back if it's to follow more closely with the system.
Yeah, I love that. Guy, what's up, buddy? Good to see you.
Hey, this conversation makes me realize that I have a completely different experience to what people are talking here because um, I would never tell designers what they need to use because why would they listen to me? Um, Designers do whatever they want. I don't know if you noticed it. I mean, we have more than zero detaches in the system, so I really want to start from designers know their designers and the product managers and all the people who are working on the I would call it the front line of the product. They know what their users need. They know what the best experience is. And if it's something that we can find commonalities across different things, then perfect for standardizing within the design system. But I'm not going to be the one who dictates for them. I can again, say, hey, do you really need to use a circular button instead of the button that everyone else is using? But if they say, you know what, in this case we do, then yeah, go ahead. Um, I don't want to be a police
Yeah.
for that.
I
Yeah.
love that perspective, Guy. I think that, like, if I was trying to sort of play the other side of that,
Hmm.
I would say to you, like, okay, what promises did you make the organization that the system would deliver, right? And if the system's going to deliver efficiency, and you
Hmm.
have enabled design teams, product teams, to go and do, in this case, like they could sort of say they want to do what they want to do, are we giving up the metrics, that we've promised? Are we not able to deliver on our promises because of decisions being made by other parts of the org, right? So how do
Yeah.
you address that?
Yeah. And this is where the fact that we're part of a system, not the design system, but we're part of a system of
Yeah.
people and organization comes into play, because you would have an engineering team that ask, why do I need to now spend time coding something that already exists?
Mhm.
We would have researchers who go and test the products with customers and say, you know what, the fact that you're editing a document one way here and editing a document here, our customers have literally told us, we feel like your products have been created, like it feels like you're shipping the org structure. Like one of the customers said that to us. And then we can be there and say, hey, we have a way to mitigate that. But it's always a conversation. Like until I would say this year, I mean, our design system has been around for 4 years. This is the first year that the design org itself is becoming aware of, you know what? Maybe we should have a bit more consistency in how we do things. And it's great. And I doesn't matter how much I advocated for that before. Some people were listening and some people just didn't care, because for them it's features, features, features.
Yeah.
So it's never an either or. It's really trying to find those places where it makes sense for me to push a bit more, and other places where I say, you know what, do what you need. And I kind of know that eventually you're going to come to our side.
This is getting at what I think maybe Stephen was hinting at earlier, which is like the culture of the org should drive the cohesion. We should be making decisions in our interfaces across the organization that align with who we want to be and what we want to express. And the system can kind of come in and look for the patterns that are consistent and systematize those and make them easy to use and all of those things. But there has to be that organizational wide agreement. Um,
I just want to say,
yeah.
reply to something that Sarah put in the chat, because I think
Mm.
it's a really good point. Hey, Sarah, I hope you're okay in Minneapolis. I don't see it as a binary. I don't see it as either we police people or it's complete chaos. I think there's a lot of middle ground to find between, hey, here is our stance. Here is what we recommend. Here are the efficiencies you're going to get if you use this. However, if you see something that you see performs better with your users, let's talk about it.
No, I definitely agree. I think I stated earlier, it's like a spectrum, right? There's the hard governance and rules and boundaries, and then there's the other. And for me, it's always up for a conversation. But in my org, I have so many enterprise tools that use our, like, hundreds. And so if we allowed everybody to do whatever, and I have, my user personas are also so broad, like from a entry level back end engineer managing a admin tool to, a full front end team with UX design and everything. So yeah, there's a spectrum.
Um, okay, we got a lot of hands. This is great. Deanna, what's up?
Hello. I was hearing all this conversation and thinking that I'm at a point where the point is to drive consistency, but at the same time, we have a system that is kind of bad and we're doing a next gen design system. So people are straddling this consistency innovation boundary. And what I've done so far was with my team was to have a panel where we see what people design so we can find those moments to drive consistency. But I was curious, what tools or methods everybody here is using to ensure that some of these pockets of innovation make it back into the wider system or are scaled back. And right now, I have a database in my head. We have GitHub, we have a table. We used to have like a Figma, drop all your snowflakes in here just in case in the future we want to scale that to the system level. And that it still doesn't feel like it works. So I'm just curious how you deal with that, like bringing the expressiveness back in when it makes sense.
The best luck that we had was from like specifically pairing with teams, so like workshops or embedding with teams or doing reverse embeds. Um, uh, we created all this contribution guidance, but the best contributions that we got, I think, were just the easiest things. Like we were successful at getting new icons contributed, but when it came to actually shaping new patterns, we tried this idea called like Polaris Labs, where it was like, hey team, are you doing something novel in your product, and do you want us to like run a workshop with you, or a Polaris team member to embed with you? And so we actually got the like enough specificity and know-how about what problem that team was solving to then bring it back. Or we would in some cases a designer from a product team would lead that. Like he would say, "Hey, I want to lead this new location picker pattern project because I see it across a bunch of different teams." So it wasn't always just the system team leading those, but yeah, I found more like workshop, office hours, directly pairing with people to be the most successful for bringing those things back. In the issue is though like getting that visibility. So I would need to be really connected with the managers of those teams to know and like to specifically ask them like, what do you have coming up that could be bringing some interesting new solutions.
Anybody else have an answer to that question from Diana? Was that Guy or Christine? Okay, go ahead.
Hello.
What's up? That's funny.
Um, yeah, I just typed this in the chat as well, but what we've started to do on our team is to leverage our design ambassadors. This is one design ambassador per like group of products currently. And like starting next week, but they've done it a little bit previously. We will be reviewing all of our community support requests and enhancement requests with them. That way we can directly see, okay, who needs what, where are all the commonalities, and this will be at a really high level because it'll just be a little chunk of the meeting once a month. But once we get to that enhancement and need more details, we'll already know exactly who to reach out to and things like that. So, yeah.
Nice. That's super helpful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Isabel, what's up?
I was going to say something on a very similar vein. Well, I
Okay.
will add to that is that I think what helps out of that is that it provides a framework for other designers to say like, okay, hey, this is what innovating in the system looks like and can look like, which essentially is working together with the system. And yeah, it provides kind of that framework for them, which I think has been a bit of the problem is like, how do we interact, at least for me, how do we interact with the system and how do we like push the boundaries of it without seeing the system as the enforcer?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
Nice.
I've always loved the idea of pushing other teams' work that push the system in interesting ways or do something completely different and just like celebrating that.
Yeah, that's great. Laura, what's up?
Just sort of in the same vein of this this conversation around like how you enforce, govern, and have these relationships. I think what I love about it and what I love the most about this job, right, is the human aspect of it, right? Obviously, it's different across organizations, how complex, big they are, but it's that relationship building. It's that it's a relationship that you create with other designers and how they trust you in a lot of ways. And when you do have to enforce things and tell them like, sorry, like, keep it this way, like this is, the guidelines are set for a reason, or like, hey, we hadn't thought of that. You're pushing, like, we want to expand, like, let's absolutely explore that. Let's work together. Could this be a contribution from your team? So yeah, I just love that, like, regardless of how like systematic and also like this AI space that we're all in, like you need people and you need humans and you need to like build relationships. So just wanted to say that.
Yeah, love it. And the challenge with that, I totally agree with that, 100%. The challenge, I think, in a lot of these things is just the scalability of it, right? If you're working in a large org, like Yesenia, you said, for that to have visibility, I needed to have relationships with the managers of these teams. Well, I mean, how many people were you trying to maintain a relationship with,
It was like over 50.
Yeah, like, how do we scale that, Like,
Yeah. I honestly, if people have been able to find solutions that have scaled well, I would love to hear that too, because it has been a challenge.
yeah. Steven?
I just remembered I have a note kind of on this topic that enablement is greater than restriction. Design systems are not creative handcuffs. Design systems should free teams from minutia, affording greater creativity and solving unique product needs. So this, I think, kind of drives at my thoughts on design systems in general is that like the core of the consistency part should happen at sort of like a pretty fundamental level of the design system. Like what are the things that really like strike us as unique to the brand that we need to make sure are expressed across all of our products? Like let's get those right. Let's make those enforceable and sort of let's govern those things. But everything else is sort of up for grabs. And if your system does not provide the sort of building blocks for people to have creative freedom, then you're maybe going a little too far with your handcuffs. We'll say it
Yeah,
that way.
Or
yeah.
even it is your architecture. So then that was the problem. That's why I had written that article, because we could say, oh no, it's the system is just the starting point. But if the reality is different, if the reality is that any time that you try to create a custom layout using one of the like a card component, you have to override things, then the the shape of the tool isn't actually matching the thing that you're saying. But I totally agree with the idea that actually being more opinionated about the design language, and how to show up as your product and as your brand, and then having more flexibility in the way that people compose. To me,
Mhm.
it got us some better success with people being able to solve things in the best way.
There's 2 things I wanna hit on before we end. We're getting tight on time, these things always go so fast, but one is, Sonia, I thought if could you explain the concept of accelerators, diluters, and differentiators for folks who haven't read that article? And then the second thing I'd love to hit on is just this concept. This is just an idea that we saw kinda came out of the conversation around this idea of a differentiation budget. So, let's start with your image from your article.
Yeah. So I had basically wrote that design system components can fall under these three categories. And so I'll start with diluters. The diluters are those components that have tons of props that are trying to be everything for everyone, solve all the problems that maybe started out clean, but then as different teams needed more things, you just kept adding props. And they're just rigid to work with. So a table that has like 50 props, right? That would be a diluter. And on the other end of the spectrum, you have your accelerators, which is, all right, break that down into even smaller pieces. You have a table header, you have a table cell, you have a table row. And once you have those pieces, then consumers can build those into their differentiators. So they can take those pieces and they can build an inventory table that has a different display of information than a reports table, perhaps. So that was basically the
Yeah.
TLDR of that framework.
I love this. I feel like it's such a smart way to sort of assess your existing components. Like that's the use case I really found to be compelling was like I could take this model and I could go look at every component that have that exists right now in my system and say, well, that's an accelerator, but that is definitely a diluter. And then it also gives you a framework for breaking diluters down into things that can be more composable. So I think that's a really smart. Thank you for sharing that with us. And then we've got 10 minutes here. So anything else on that? So before we move beyond that concept, is that something that resonates with folks? Yes, no. Go ahead, Matt.
Oh, I was just going to ask if you're saying if you have any other examples, or if the group has any other examples of diluters. I'm still trying to understand it.
Yeah. One example that I had actually in my article was just a card. So we had a card component that had too many props built into it. So it had like it has a card has a header, it has sections, it has I think if you added the footer, it automatically added a divider um, above the footer. So it was making too many assumptions about layout and composition without knowing what you were displaying. So turning the card into a card that, yeah, a card is a bad word on the list, to just being it's literally just a container. And then you can lay out the information within that container however you want. So that was another example. Also, text field. If you could have a text field that has all of these different props, like text field that displays a number, text field that displays a password, but you could also break that out into password field, number field. So
And I wonder if like like my head goes right away to like, okay, well, you're giving control to consuming teams, right? In terms of like, if it's just a container, I can put anything I want in there, but that's not what you're saying. It's not anything you want. It's like, hey, there's a bunch of things that you can put in here, and these are all very sort of specifically designed as well. And so it's that sort of like, it's like building the smaller things so that people can build the bigger things. Is that a fair way?
yeah, exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
Okay.
So if somebody needs a container that actually needs to display a lot of badges instead of just text.
Yeah. Got it. Stephen.
Yesenia, I kind of want to throw a wrench at you and see what you do with it. I'll just put it this way. How do you account for these diluters in teams who couldn't build those things by themselves?
So basically, they're adding a prop or they're adding a prop to an
Or
existing
let's say
design
the
system.
design system team is adding props to solve for uh, teams who don't know how to build these things themselves. They require, the expert development or design, work that design system teams are going to afford a organization.
Yeah, I don't know if this is the best solution, but we did have to at one point draw the line and say adding additional props to the components isn't it 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 isn't going to work. Like that, we're moving away from that, and in that case, we can offer to help that team. We can help again bring a developer, embed a developer with that team to help them ideally train them up and teach them. So again, it's not the best for for scale
Yeah.
though.
And this is a problem we bump up against in almost every one of these sessions, though, which is the skill of consuming teams, right? And whose job is it to level them up in the tooling, in the frameworks? I mean, this is just an ongoing challenge that I think we have to face. And we have strong opinions on both sides. Like some of us, I think, would say it's not my job to teach you how to use Figma. It's not my job to teach you how to compose things, right? And some of us would say, heck yeah, it is. Like I want to be as helpful and sort of like educational as I can. And I think this is a culture decision in my mind. It's like if we have an organization where the expectation is high in terms of skill and we hire highly skilled people, then yeah, then maybe that's the expectation that they should know these things, right? But if we're an organization that has a learning culture where we hire folks who don't have as much experience and we train them up, then yeah, maybe that's everybody's job. So I don't know if there's right or wrong here, but yeah, the scale problem is real too with this stuff. Awesome, folks. Good conversation. Okay, last little bit here. This idea of a differentiation budget. So I can't remember who it was that sort of came up with the concept of performance budgets, but that's what my mind kept drifting to, which was like, the idea that we could say, hey, there's a limited amount of bits and bytes that you're permitted to use up when you release this thing out into the production. And so that concept of a performance budget is easy to track because it's like I can measure the weight of a thing before it goes over the wire, and I can say the total package size is this. And if I cross that threshold, I can flag that, stop the build, ask people to come and make things smaller, But the same thing we could do something like that with differentiation. If we could measure how different is this thing that you're trying to ship visually, then we could say, hey, there's a certain budget that you're allotted to differentiate. Now, I don't know if this would work or not, but it's just a concept, and I just thought I would toss it out there. Has anybody thought about something like this? Something you've seen or considered? Nobody. Go ahead.
No, I haven't. No, I'm kidding. I mean, technically no, but I feel like I'm kind of like punk kind of, or I want to like, we're saying like, am I still a designer, for example, if I work on design systems? Part of me is like, yeah, I'm still a designer. I could still maybe do this stuff. So I kind of like to pitch in every once in a while, just like, I call it my secret menu projects, like usually accessibility related. Like I'll like kind of pitch it for like a team, but not really tell my boss sometimes. But she always finds out and she's always happy. But I kind of like, they'll ask me like, can I do this? And I'll be like, okay, just do it quietly because I want to see what happens. Like, I want to see it in production for myself in my own eyes. Like, I know it's against the rules, but like, I want to see if it's cool. And then if it works, then I can bring it into the system. And if it doesn't work, I don't have to say I helped with it at all.
I love it. I love it. You're teaching us all your tricks. Isabel, what's up?
I have a bit of an informal way to do this, but we have a few teams who work specifically on AI in our product. And that's been working with them really closely has been really good just for, in general, showing the org. But in regards to this, I kind of set a bit of a differentiation budget for them just because it's under the wing of innovation. Not to say that there aren't rules there, but yeah, for sure. Something that goes a little bit tied to innovation where we're at.
So it's more of like an instinctual thing than it is like a measured sort of metric in that case, right? And I wonder if that's just how we probably operate kind of in this way, right? Like we're looking and we're saying, okay, how different is this? Is it different for good reasons? So we're making those judgments already, but I guess something like this would be putting real numbers around it, Brandon.
I just have a question, and I'm sorry you said it. I may have missed it. But are we drawing a line between what is differentiation and what we're calling drift?
Yesenia, I'll let you take that.
So, well, okay, so it depends, right? So what I would call drift, like we created guidelines for how merchants should, how common actions should appear inside the product. So if you have an add action, what iconography do you use? What language do you use? If you're deleting, if you're removing. So there's things that would feel confusing because a merchant is doing the same thing and it's showing up in different ways. So that I would call drift. When it comes to differentiation, it's the opposite. It's two things that are actually different look the same. And so that's when you want to encourage the differentiation. You want it to look as accurate as possible to what it actually is. If that makes sense.
That's a great explanation. Yeah. All right, folks, we did it again. We're at an hour, and we could probably have another hour here. So, thank you, Yesenia, for bringing this convo.
Yeah,
really
this was
fun.
great. It really did go so fast.
It flies. Yeah. A couple of quick announcements. If you haven't connected with Yesenia, please do that. Her website, her LinkedIn, she's got great articles coming out on Substack. So please go do that. I'm sure she would love to stay connected with all of you. Redwoods is open, as you know. But if you like this kind of engagement, this is what we do. This is what we try to do every day, every week. So jump in, join us. We would love to hear what's going on in your world. There's a bunch of articles and things that folks in the Redwoods community have released, and so thank you so much for folks who have been sharing the things that they're learning. Jump in and check some of those things out. Again, these job postings are here, and I'm going to take a look at all of your feedback. Thank you so much for dropping that. If you joined late, if you have a minute, I would love for you to answer these two questions. Why do you come to the question, and what could we be doing better in 2026? So take a minute and drop an answer in there for me. I'll be announcing the release of the podcast of this episode, recap, deep dive, all of it in the next few days. So thank you all so much for being here. Yesenia, you rock. I'm so glad that we got to do this with you. Thank you.
Yes, so much fun.
We'll see you all soon. Cheers.